Hello, this will be my presentation on development of teaching. My name is Charles Rogers. I'll be focusing on Shakespeare in Key Stage 3. So one of the reasons I chose to focus my assignment on this is because when beginning my PGCE course, I undertook a subject audit for both Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, looking at my strengths and areas of development within my subject knowledge and teaching. Another reason I decided to focus on it is because Shakespeare is such an important part of the DFE, but looking at my subject knowledge and teaching, I originally said that I felt quite competent in teaching 2 Shakespeare plays. I felt this because of the research I'd done before beginning my course on teaching. However, despite feeling competent, there are many areas of my subject knowledge that were limited surrounding plays as a whole. So even though with 2 plays I did have some confidence and felt competent teaching them, I've said that improvising, rehearsing, performing play scripts and poetry in order to generate language and discuss language and its use of meaning is something I felt quite limited on. Secondly, understanding how the work of dramatists is communicated effectively through performance, how alternative staging allows for different interpretations of play. These both formulated my subject action plan and targets and goals I wanted to improve upon in my teaching across the year, and I took this forward across the whole year of all my practice, especially with a focus on Shakespeare, because those were the plays we were dealing with in my current school. So, as I previously mentioned, another reason I decided to focus this assignment on Shakespeare is that the Department of Education, DfE, states that 2 Shakespeare plays and pre-1914 English prose texts need to be studied and understood, where students learn the skills to make inferences and refer to the evidence in their reading or writing across learn those texts. I think the main takeaway there is studied and understood. As you'll see as we go through this presentation, there's a lot of difficulty teachers face in both teaching this and difficulties that pupils face in understanding Shakespeare text. And that's why I chose as a topic to really demonstrate how I brought this to the focal point of my teaching and built tasks, lessons, and adapted by practice in order for students to understand Shakespeare's language, use of language, and his plays as a whole. I said that understand this allowed me to create clear targets when designing my subject action plan, ensuring that each lesson that I planned surrounded this and built upon enhancing pupil understanding as well as quotation analysis and inference skills. So really addressing what the DfE is asking of teachers to bring out of students. Additionally, I took some further research and I discovered on tests that there was a survey of 500 teachers in 2016 where 56% of them felt that their students found it difficult to relate to Shakespeare. I feel like this is such an important area to develop on my teachers as well, and to build lessons that engage students to not only connect to the play, but relate it to their own experiences and something that they can understand. This study also found that 55% of teachers found that students were uninspired by his works. So again, another reason I chose to do this was because it's a way to promote my love for teaching and show how I really engage students in this across my year of teaching. This also informed a lot of my planning throughout the year, and another reason I've decided to focus my assignment on this is because it's been such a focal point for my planning of lessons going forth. So in my initial audit findings, I found, if we go back, that even though I felt comfortable with Shakespeare text, there were many areas were limited, and this informed my subject action plan. So 2 areas of my subject action plan that dealt with Shakespeare was first created on March 10th, where I was being instructed to plan the Year 8's lessons for 2 terms, and this dealt with the Tempest. The text I felt quite familiar with, however, there were elements of the context that I wasn't as caught up to date with, and therefore I sat down, had meetings with my mentor, and we discussed how to further my development there. So my plan for that was I wish to develop my contextual knowledge of the play, in particular designing a few lessons that reference the shipwreck that inspired the play, i.e. the Sea Venture. And you'll see later on that I looked at certain websites that inform my teaching here. And also it was important that I do further research on the origins of plays as a whole, looking at Greek and Roman customs of the all the way to the modern day. so melodramas and so on. And then on the 4th of June, I was looking at Year 7's A Midsummer's Night Dream, and my goals there, because it's an unfamiliar text to me, was to read through the text at least twice, make some annotations as I go, comprise a list of key events, themes, and characters involved in order to begin my planning for this, and finally ensure textual references are included consistently throughout. So I always have those quotes present in my lesson that students can really engage with. And that was a little bit later towards my development on the 4th of June. So my actions to meet these, first of all, were to ensure that I did extensive research planning with mentors, I mentioned earlier. They provided me with lots of websites that I can go and do further research on, but also to match it up to the curriculum, to look at the school's actual curriculum and match it with there. I looked at critical editions of the book to help my understanding also of the etymology of words, especially when teaching language of Shakespeare. I felt like it was such an important part of my own research to bring this into my planning before I taught these lessons. Creating a glossary for myself, not just for students, and it also means that when we're reading through the text on the board, I'm not just providing them translations, but maybe just glossary of certain words they can understand that I already have ready in my planning. I also said I wanted to transform these into interactive and creative lessons. One way I did that successfully was the Sea Venture itself. After teaching them the context of that and the shipwreck, I got them to do a descriptive or creative writing piece on this themselves to really engage them with what the sailors might have been facing, what the storm may have been like in that situation, to really bring those ideas out of them. And then for the Midsummer's Night Dream on the 4th of June, I went to ensure that my knowledge of the play was adept, again through the various readings. I have read through it twice before going into any teaching with that, and also picking out the essential themes. Make notes of key quotes, again that will inform my planning, and finally explore translations of the text and how this might be useful in adapting lessons towards Key Stage 3 pupils. So sometimes students come in, they really feel unprepared to learn Shakespeare, and I think the use of translations here was a way for me to build in that confidence for them early on. So when improving my subject knowledge, I not only read and annotated, but looked at other sources of research to help me improve upon my subject knowledge. Examples of this include educational websites. So the Royal Shakespeare Company was really what informed my contextual knowledge of The Tempest, looking at the Sea Venture and so on. We also looked at BBC Bitesize, often a website used for pupils themselves, but also really interesting to know what kind of things we can link into there, maybe as a homework task and so on. And also looking at lit charts for translations. Again, these weren't going to be used in every lesson. Sometimes we'd have to list the glossary, but I think it's still important to look at translations and how they can be incorporated into a lesson. So Co said that teachers need to understand both the content they are teaching and how to teach it. And I think that using websites like this has really informed how I teach these subjects. Moving on from there, I also looked at the example websites for both exemplary answers, but also multimedia videos such as BBC Teach as another way to really bring out my ideas of what I want to teach, but also maybe inform some other ways students can learn. So multimedia ways that students can learn within these lessons as well. An area of weakness that I said right at the beginning was context for me, and then here are some just examples of my subject knowledge, bringing that in, and my research to really show how context has played a big part within my lessons so far. So then going forward, once I had planned all this and taught it, I then received some feedback on the lessons I taught, developing this in practice. So from my full lesson observation on the 6th, I got feedback saying that it was a good knowledge of Shakespeare, introduction to the word groundling, that is someone who would watch the plays standing up, not necessarily in the best conditions in the open air, so rain pouring and stuff. They said it's a good idea for a 200-word challenge. That would again inform that creative response students could have to that. We also had good tasks that applied knowledge taught, match up tasks, talk about the genre, so we're going to be going back to historical context as well there, and finally good creative tasks and links to knowledge learned. I feel like that was really important for me because one of my initial goals was to turn these into creative things to really engage students and promote their love for learning. They also said connected language and Shakespeare to students. Again, that was a predominant focus of my initial plans as well. And then finally, on the other side, we have that students were introduced to characters, they have a better understanding of their actions and the speech, and the lesson was well structured, moments of discussion and so on. And again, the introduction to the word grounded was a great idea for future creative writing tasks, again, bringing in that creative aspect and so on. And then from my VA visit, I also got some further feedback on this, and that I directed pupils to translate the text into their book, not necessarily word, but with guided and scaffolded help, and also great breaking up of the text with color coding. Translation was provided. This is the idea that I didn't provide full translations for them, but more scaffolded minor glossary translations. And in fact, my mentor said that they want to incorporate this across the whole board of English. I felt very complimented by that as well. And then finally, good balance of reading, speaking, thinking, and writing. I feel like with Shakespeare, it can very much be focused on the text and then just writing or note making. I was really happy that part of my feedback was that there was so much of this incorporated into my lessons. However, there were also critical feedback in the area of developments that I received from this. So what was said to me is, whilst my subject knowledge is excellent, there perhaps needs to be some work on prosody. This may be down to confidence in reading Shakespeare. So this is a word that I got wrong during the lesson, said out loud, and the response I got was really quite reassuring, that if I make mistakes, don't be afraid to own them. It will help students feel less embarrassed when they do the same thing. And be aware that even in year 11, students may struggle with writing it. So something that often happens with Shakespeare is actually that 43% of teachers have reported that their pupils are put off by the plays because of a preconceived idea that they would not be able to understand them. So for me to own up to not understanding the word in that moment, something that I may have skimmed over in my plan or had forgotten about, might have given pupils more confidence in their own interpretations of the play. Discussion with my mentor meetings also helped me to better understand the difficult language of students and also find resources which further inform my planning. Shakespeare's Words was a really good example of this, to help me really look at the etymology of the words, but also how to say them, the use of how they're being used and the exact context of these words as well. And another book that I really looked at, really fantastic book that was recommended to me, was Shakespeare's Language in Depth, Think on My Words by David Crystal. There was a section in it called The Way They Said It, which really explored how the words are to be said. So again, that helped me to go away from this area of development and really inform my planning going ahead. And as I said, additionally, collaborative planning has provided me with further improvement of subject knowledge. So when I planned the curriculum for VA, I did a couple of lessons with colleagues, and I followed McGee's strategies for effective collaboration here to ensure I would have successful collaboration with my colleagues. So, for example, I would make collaboration meaningful, I would communicate and share ideas with the people I was collaborating with, and so on. I then undertook a little bit further research of my own. So after discovering that 60% of respondents said that Shakespeare's language was the biggest hurdle for people to overcome studying plays, I undertook some further research. So Carly Joy, who found that teachers often give up on embracing difficult language to use Shakespeare text, often turn to No Fear Shakespeare, which is the exact translations to modern day, or film adaptations rather to replace the original language. I felt like this doesn't really conform to what the DFE is asking of teachers, and therefore this was something I really paid attention to and made sure that I wasn't giving up on looking at Shakespeare's original language and so on. She also looks at the challenges teachers face and how students begin to fret they won't understand language like thou and dost before even exploring it. It's more of a preconceived idea that it's going to be too challenging for them, when in fact, I said a little bit further, Ralph Allen points out that even though there is a fear surrounding Shakespeare's language that it might not be understood as too difficult, what it wants is to understand that 90% of it is already known to us. So we already understand 90% of the words in Shakespeare. And I've always incorporated this into the first lesson of the term or throughout the term when I'm teaching Shakespeare, because it really provides students with the confidence they need in going forth with this learning. Secondly, the book Teaching Shakespeare with Purpose by Thompson and Turchi provides tasks for teachers and assessments in engaging students with the language of Shakespeare. That one was really useful for me to find different tasks to use. And then Brandon Schumacher's research for the classroom, Read or Not to Read, that was really interesting in looking at close readings or film adaptations and so on, how to use different ways to engage students to learn Shakespeare and to effectively introduce it into their learning experience. And then finally, a subject webinar I attended recently talked about the use of translations, whether there are drawbacks to it, limitations to it, and so on, or how it can be effective into this teaching. It's really important to me because in 2015, there was a report finding that teachers found CPD to have a lot of impact actually on the pupils' outcomes, and therefore not only subject webinars, but CPD has been really important for me to bring in my teaching practices further as well. Pedagogical research and knowledge, further on than that. Gibson found that when Shakespeare was not being translated in front of the classroom, the experience led to increased confidence and knowledge reflecting their written work. So this is that idea before about maybe providing glossary rather than direct translations, allowing them to really build out their own ideas here. Gibson also found that in some cases, students were teaching teachers things when they were able to inform their own ideas and not be given the translation straight away. They were more comfortable in their analysis and their inference, again, conforming to what the DFE says about learning Shakespeare. Stanley Wells aimed to bridge the gap between the classroom and the stage, bringing more performance techniques to a classroom and so on. And I feel like this is very important and something I've not been comfortable with and have trying to incorporate more into my practice. And Esther furthers this idea, saying that even though this has been brought to life a little bit more, it's important to examine there's limitations to it, such as teachers' own subject knowledge surrounding this. And she also provides a list of ways or list of research opportunities for teachers to improve their knowledge surrounding this. Another prevalent area of research for me was teaching Shakespeare to EAL students, because that was a difficulty I also faced. And Yang Meng and Joe Winston explored this, or how to combat this further. And then we can also consider ideas of hidden curriculum and how those ideas of language can lead to inequalities towards students. So maybe that those who can't access it feel inadequate to those who can, and it's about teaching it across the classroom. And that's why I often fall to group activities surrounding this. And then again, CPD also being incredibly useful for me. So another thing that really inspired me to do this was the amount of misconceptions that were brought out of my lesson plans when teaching Shakespeare. So, but the way I wanted to address this was through challenging them. One way I challenge them is to look at the most predominant misconceptions, one being language, where pupils often do not understand language, and one way I do this to really engage them further with it, and maybe a challenge task asking, what tone do you think they were using this in the speech, or what words suggest these emotions, to really make them understand the language further and what these words mean. And then finally, context, not only the context of the play, so they have an understanding of that, but also to contextualize what they will be reading in those moments. Further challenging misconceptions, I looked at Freeman and Talbot to explore how critical thinking is often used in ineffective ways. And I also attended a CPD recently where Think Pair Share, they discuss how the think element is often overlooked and that they go straight to communicate with their peers, not really demonstrating the importance of their students really taking their time to explore their own ideas and think through them to come up with a concise response. And then finally, that I really want to build creative responses to Shakespeare. So that's why a lot of my tasks have incorporated creative responses, turned into creative writing, turned into adaptive performative pieces, going back to what was said on the previous slide, to really engage them with the art and the text as living pieces more than just Elizabethan plays that they're looking at. And then finally, return to my action plan. I discussed that when researching the Sea Venture, it went very well for me. I was able to transform these into creative lessons and engage students further. Nevertheless, I still want to continue my development of this. And then with Midsummer's Night Dream, I have said that making annotations to key themes of repertory twice has made me more confident in my teaching of this text, and my knowledge of the text has really improved historical context of it, looking at plays such as Pyramus and Thisbe that inspired this and so on, and also how I've done further context on groundlings, as I mentioned earlier, and so on. Final feedback that I have got most recently is that I have incorporated good subject knowledge throughout. I've started, I have used some of informative for reading to ensure comprehension. I have good, quick AFL according with the text, and I think that's really important that my questioning tells me what students are gaining from these texts and so on, and also that my subject knowledge was a key strength, and that my lesson was well structured. However, there are still some takeaways I'd like to go forward, such as maybe incorporating more scaffolding with my writing tasks. And here finally is my bibliography. Thank you.